The observation deck of the Meridian Station hummed with the low frequency of recycled air pushing through titanium vents. Lisa Chen stood motionless near the reinforced polycarbonate window, her eyes fixed on the creature across the room. The Viren diplomat, designated as Subject Cathara in the official xenobiological database, had frozen mid-gesture, its three-fingered hand suspended in the air like a sculpture. Laura Reeves, the station's xenopsychology specialist, noticed the shift immediately. She had been reviewing the atmospheric composition readings on her datapad when the temperature in the room seemed to drop, though the environmental controls showed a steady 21.3 degrees Celsius. It wasn't the temperature, it was the tension. "Lisa," Laura whispered, barely moving her lips, "don't stare directly at it." But Lisa couldn't help it. Her eyes, dark and alert, tracked every microscopic movement of Cathara's translucent membrane, the thin layer of bioluminescent tissue that covered its thorax. The membrane flickered in patterns that the translation AI had been attempting to decode for the past 47 hours. So far, the algorithms had managed only 17% accuracy. Cathara remained perfectly still, not the stillness of sleep or meditation, but the absolute cessation of motion that spoke of a deeply rooted survival instinct. Its compound eyes, 12 clusters arranged in a radial pattern around its elongated head, had stopped their constant microadjustments. Even its breathing, the gentle expansion and contraction of its auxiliary respiratory chambers, had slowed to near imperceptibility. Laura had read about this in the preliminary reports from the first contact team on Viren Prime. The species had evolved on a planet where the apex predators hunted primarily through motion detection. The Viren's ancestors had developed an extreme stillness response, a biological imperative that overrode even conscious thought when they perceived threat behavior in other species. "Lisa," Laura said again, more urgently this time, "you need to look away now." Lisa's training kicked in. She was a xenobiologist, trained at the Mars Colonial Institute, with specializations in exoevolutionary patterns and cross-species communication protocols. She understood the theory, but standing here, 3 meters from an alien intelligence that represented humanity's first diplomatic contact with a space-faring civilization, theory felt inadequate. Her eyes moved in small, precise increments. The Viren's left anterior limb had been reaching toward the holographic display that floated between them, a three-dimensional representation of trade routes through the Kepler 442 system. Now that limb hung in space, trembling almost imperceptibly. It was that trembling that caught Lisa's attention. She couldn't stop watching it. The tremor occurred at a frequency of approximately 4.7 Hz, based on her mental calculation. It reminded her of the way certain Earth insects vibrated their wings before flight, a preparatory motion that built up energy in specialized muscles. Was Cathara preparing to flee or to attack? Laura moved slowly, deliberately, keeping her own movements smooth and predictable. She had spent 6 months studying Viren behavioral patterns through the limited footage available from the contact team. The species communicated through a complex combination of membrane bioluminescence, subsonic vocalizations, and what the researchers had termed gesture scent, the release of specific pheromones timed with particular physical movements. "Cathara," Laura said, her voice modulated to a lower register that the translation AI would convert into Viren-compatible frequencies. "We mean no harm. My colleague is curious. It's a human trait. We observe closely when we're interested." The translation device, a small quantum processor embedded in the room's communication array, hummed as it worked. The device utilized entangled particles to minimize the delay between languages, a breakthrough that had made real-time alien communication theoretically possible. In practice, the nuances were still being worked out. Cathara's membrane flickered once, a brief pulse of amber light that the AI translated as curious predator distinction unclear, Observation intensity matches threat assessment protocols. Lisa finally managed to shift her gaze. She looked down at her hands, studying her own fingers as if seeing them for the first time. Her heart rate had elevated. She could feel it in her chest, pounding at roughly 110 beats per minute. The adrenaline response was automatic, triggered by the primitive part of her brain that recognized a potentially dangerous situation. "I'm looking away now," Lisa said, speaking slowly and clearly for the AI. "I understand that my watching made you uncomfortable. In human culture, direct observation is often a sign of respect and interest, not predation." The quantum processor worked through the translation, breaking down not just the words but the contextual implications, the emotional undertones, the cultural frameworks. It took 3.2 seconds, an eternity in diplomatic time. Kathara's anterior limb lowered gradually. The movement was smooth, controlled, like a mechanical arm on a precision instrument. Laura noted that the VRIN's membrane had shifted to a pale blue, which the preliminary color-emotion mapping suggested indicated cautious proceeding or wary continuing. "Human eyes," Kathara's translation came through, "possess high concentration of motion detection capabilities. Your species evolved as persistence hunters, yes." Laura nodded, a gesture she immediately regretted as Kathara's entire body tensed again. She vocalized instead, "Yes. Our ancestors tracked prey over long distances. We're very good at noticing movement." "And we," Kathara responded, its membrane now pulsing in slow, rhythmic patterns of green and blue, "evolved as the prey. Our stillness is not choice. It is imperative written in genetic code. When predator eyes lock onto VRIN body, ancient programming activates. We become stone. We become invisible." Lisa found this fascinating. She wanted to pull up her datapad to start recording observations, to compare this with the evolutionary adaptations of Earth species. But she kept her hands at her sides, her eyes on the floor. She could feel Laura's gaze on her, a silent communication between the two humans. "How do your people conduct negotiations?" Laura asked. "If direct observation triggers this response, how do you interact with each other?" Kathara's membrane flickered in a pattern the AI struggled to translate. It settled on peripheral vision protocols. We observe without direct focus. Eye clusters allow full visual field without directional pointing. Among VRIN, to look directly is intimate act, done only with family bonds or mating pairs. The implications hit both humans simultaneously. For the past 2 days, Lisa had been staring intently at Kathara during every interaction, analyzing, observing, trying to understand. From the VRIN's perspective, she had been either threatening it or attempting some form of inappropriate intimacy. "I apologize," Lisa said immediately. "I didn't understand. I've been behaving badly without realizing it." The translation took longer this time. The concept of apology, Laura knew, didn't exist in quite the same way in VRIN culture. The AI would be working through alternative frameworks, trying to convey meaning across the void of different evolutionary paths. Kathara's stillness began to ease. Its respiratory chambers resumed their normal rhythm, expanding and contracting in the distinctive three-phase pattern that VRIN physiology required. The membrane shifted to a warm orange, tinged with streaks of yellow. "Understanding now exists where confusion lived before," came the translation. "This is the purpose of first contact, to build bridges across evolutionary chasms. Your species hunted, mine hid. Now we meet in space, where neither hunting nor hiding determines survival. We must learn new ways." Laura felt something release in her chest. This was why she had joined the diplomatic corps, why she had spent years studying xenopsychology and cross-species communication. This moment, this exact moment, when two intelligences from completely different worlds found a way to understand each other. "Would you be willing to teach us?" Laura asked. to show us how V-RIN observe and interact without triggering the stillness response. Kathara's membrane pulsed in a complex pattern that the AI tagged as affirmative enthusiastic. The V-RIN moved toward the holographic display, its movements now fluid and confident. Lisa watched from her peripheral vision, carefully keeping her direct gaze averted. "I will teach," Kathara said, "and you will teach me about persistence hunting strategies, yes. I wish to understand how species moves from predator past to cooperation present. This knowledge valuable for V-RIN philosophers." Lisa smiled, still looking at the floor. "I'd be happy to share everything we know, but maybe we start with how to look at each other without causing panic." The membrane flickered with what could only be described as humor. "Yes, this seems logical first step in diplomatic relations. Perhaps we avoid the starring wars that less advanced species might engage in." Over the next hours, Kathara demonstrated the V-RIN method of observation, a soft, unfocused gaze that took in the whole room rather than fixating on individual elements. It was similar, Laura realized, to the peripheral awareness techniques taught in certain Earth martial arts. The key was to observe without appearing to observe, to see without looking. Lisa practiced, feeling clumsy and obvious at first, but gradually she began to understand. She could sense Kathara's movements, could track the color shifts in its membrane, could interpret the subtle changes in its posture, all without ever looking directly at the alien. "This is remarkable," Lisa said. "In humans, we call this situational awareness, but we usually combine it with direct observation. To rely on it entirely requires different neural pathways," Kathara completed. "Your brain processes motion in visual cortex, yes. Ours processes in distributed network across 3 cerebral lobes. Direct focus disrupts the network, creates blind spots. Peripheral awareness maintains full sensory integration." The conversation flowed into technical details: neural architecture, evolutionary pressures, sensory processing differences. Laura recorded everything, knowing that this information would revolutionize humanity's understanding of non-human intelligence. As the station's artificial day cycle began to dim toward evening mode, Kathara made a gesture that the AI translated as satisfaction completeness. Its membrane glowed with a soft, steady purple. "Today was good learning," Kathara said. "Tomorrow we discuss trade routes." "Tomorrow," Laura confirmed. "And Kathara, thank you for your patience for teaching us." The V-RIN's membrane rippled in patterns that needed no translation. The feeling was universal: 2 intelligent species, reaching across the vast gulf of different evolutionary paths, finding common ground in the infinite darkness of space. Lisa watched from the corner of her eye as Kathara left the observation deck, its movements graceful and unhurried. She felt Laura's hand on her shoulder. "That," Laura said quietly, "is why we're out here, not for the resources or the territory, but for moments like this." Lisa nodded, still practicing her peripheral awareness. The stars beyond the window seemed brighter somehow, filled with possibilities that humanity was only beginning to understand. Somewhere out there, other species waited, species that had evolved in ways humans couldn't imagine, that saw the universe through entirely different eyes. And now, humanity was learning to see through those eyes too, not by becoming predators or prey, but by becoming something neither had been before, partners in the vast, strange adventure of existence. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of the life support systems. But it was a comfortable silence, the kind that comes after understanding has been reached. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new misunderstandings to overcome. But tonight, 2 species had taken their first real steps toward genuine communication. And in the grand scope of galactic history, that was everything.